I wanted to discuss some preliminary thoughts after finishing Carlo Rovelli, the Italian physicist Carlo Rovelli's most recent book, The Order of Time. Rovelli is one of the researchers working on the theory of quantum loop gravity, which is an alternative to string theory in the attempt to reconcile quantum theory and string theory. And I got interested in Rovelli's work because I heard from a few physicists and philosophers of science that Rovelli's ideas about the nature of reality as event-like, as a network of events, in his terms, is rather convergent with Alfred North Whitehead's way of thinking about the universe. Whitehead's process relational ontology would appear to be similar to what loop quantum gravity is suggesting about the fundamental nature of reality. A recent book on Whitehead called The Quantum of Explanation by Randall Oxier and Gary Hurstein pointed out that many physicists will unpack their philosophy of nature in books written for a popular audience, and that often within physics journals there isn't much philosophy of nature done, and even in academic philosophy of nature has kind of been replaced by the philosophy of science. And so Hurstein and Oxier in their book argued that Whitehead was one of the last mathematical physicists and philosophers in the 20th century to really take natural philosophy seriously, which is to say, to try to understand the nature of the physical world so as to make it coherent with the nature of consciousness. In other words, to think metaphysically about the ultimate structure of reality, to not just assume or presuppose that consciousness or the mental side of things is reducible to the physical side, but rather to take on the speculative challenge, the metaphysical challenge of thinking mind and nature as integral to any complete explanation of the universe that we inhabit. So, in Rovelli's book, The Order of Time, he begins by showing how relativity theory and quantum theory have both eliminated this notion of a universal timeline or of a simultaneity in nature, which is to say that what relativity shows is that every moving body, every massive object has its own time and its own space, its own proper time and proper space. And so rather than thinking of the universe as a place or a container within which things occur, or thinking of space-time as a place or a container within which things occur, rather space-time is an emergent property of these quantum events. And every event has its own proper space-time, or you could say every perspective has its own proper space-time. This is Rovelli's point of view, and loop quantum gravity is an attempt to formalize this. One of the places where I find Rovelli's thought really fascinating is when he talks about entropy and tries to offer an account of how time as we experience it emerges. Time as we experience it has a past and a future, and the past is fundamentally different than the future, and Rovelli is saying that at the quantum level this distinction does not exist. He's not an adherent of the so-called block universe idea that some interpreters of Einstein hold, which is to say that the future, just like the past, kind of exists out there in a fourth dimension. Rovelli is not saying that. He's saying the ultimate nature of reality is this network of events, but as far as these events are concerned, the flow of time that we experience is merely a secondary effect of our own perspective. And, he talks about in the inflationary cosmology or Big Bang cosmology how the present state of the universe only makes sense if there was a more highly ordered state prior to it. So in other words, the universe that we observe appears to be downstream from a very low entropy state that existed prior to it. And if we push that back far enough, we get to about 14 billion years ago, where this very low entropy state preceding the Big Bang has then continued to run down through a series of steps or stages or phases, you might say. First there was plasma, and then there was hydrogen, and then there was stars and galaxies and planets and cells, multicellular life, and industrial civilization. And at each step, energy discovered a way of spreading out, a way of moving from hot to cold more efficiently, more effectively, to the point where Rovelli describes the situation on planet Earth right now, where we have all this energy pouring in from the sun, all this heat, and what life on Earth has discovered how to do is to break down that gradient between the heat from the sun and the coldness of deep space more efficiently than would otherwise have been possible by merely chemical or physical processes, geological processes. So Rovelli, though, is only willing to talk about low entropy. He doesn't want to give it a sort of positive designation, where I would refer to it as centropy. Following Whitehead, articulate not only this tendency towards disorder or entropy, but a tendency towards order or a tendency towards complexification. Sometimes it's called neg-entropy, but again, this is to define it negatively, as though entropy were the finally real thing. And I think we are justified by the evidence of the observable universe, the physical universe, the biological and the psychological universe, in giving a positive name to this alternative counter-agency to entropy, and I would call it centropy. And what this centropy is the eros, the E-R-O-S, eros of the universe. It's that dimension of the universe that is striving to enhance and deepen and complexify its experiential capacity. So Rovelli is a physicist, right? But he's doing natural philosophy, and he's doing it in a sophisticated way. I hand that to him. He's not a reductionist. He doesn't, he's engaging with Husserl. He's engaging with Heidegger. He's not dismissing philosophy as, Neil deGrasse Tyson and Lawrence Krauss and other physicists would, who are most anti-intellectual in their dismissals of any philosophical reflection upon the data of physics. So Rovelli's a deep thinker, and I think all that I want to add, and I'm going to give a conference presentation bringing him into conversation with Whitehead in a couple of months, all I want to add is a more explicitly metaphysical perspective on the place of mind in the network of events that Rovelli is describing, because what, after all, is an event, right? In Whitehead's ontology, an event is a nexus or a society of experiencers or perceivers, right? And each of those perceivers, embedded within its society or nexus of other perceivers, or in Whitehead's terms, actual occasions of experience, they're working to enhance one another, to deepen their capacity for feeling. And I think as detailed as our physical and mathematical descriptions of nature become, there's still a need to give them meaning, which is to say, there's something it feels like to be a mass with angular momentum. There's something it feels like to be an electromagnetic vector. And complex interactions between these waves, between these masses, between these energetic vectors, complex weavings of these produce what we call human consciousness. And I think Rovelli's physics is getting us closer to a complete understanding. But we need metaphysics in order to bring these physical models into relationship to the mind that is supposedly knowing and understanding these models. So I'm going to be talking more about this and writing more about this. These are just some preliminary thoughts.